It's a warm day and I'm shut in this room until I actually get a video out. Welcome to WDRoles. My name is Charlie Etheridge Nunn. Now, Mike recently posted a few videos about UK Games EXPO, and I figured as I went there, I ought to also pitch in with my experiences of it, especially as Mike was a lot more board game focused, as is our division in this channel. So, this is the first big board game convention that I've been to since, the before times, where I went to Aircon in 2020, literally just before everything started locking down. I went to Dragon Meet last December, which was a joy, but still fairly tense feeling, fairly kind of, I don't know, it wasn't as big or as crowded as it normally is, and definitely not as large as UK Games EXPO. My plan A and my plan B for getting there and staying there fell apart. So luckily, a good friend of mine, Ben, let me couch surf on the Saturday evening. So I took a train up bright and early on Saturday morning, waited around for a little while until Mike got me a press pass, and then got to have a bit of a tour around the place and see what was there. It was huge. It's been huge for a while. Anyway, I remember when it was just for Hilton, and that was fairly big but fairly controllable. Here it was two massive halls of stalls, of demos, things like that, as well as one hall full of games, and the Hilton mainly full of, again, some open gaming areas, but a lot of the RPG games were kind of going on around there. So I spent a bit of time going back and forth between them. Let's see, as far as things that I saw, first of all, before I get onto the RPG side of things, Mike mentioned briefly Bez and her stall, and sure enough, I took in a few different games. I ended up picking up one specifically about matching words to pictures, but never words to words or pictures to pictures. I had a demo there, and I admit, I admire all of Bez's helpers. Not only do they have a kind of a glorious unified tone all dressed in red like Bez, but also they can rattle off the titles of any of Bez's games off the top of their head with minimal, if any, help. And I can rarely do that. I love Bez's naming sequence. And in fact, she did have the giant banner for Blather there, which has probably the longest title in board games, even though it's not really officially out or released or anything. I know it's far too long to even fit the name field in Board Game Geek, which is quite an impressive feat. So yeah, I played a demo there, immediately picked up the game and a promo for Wee Whimsical Creatures, and also picked up, is it Cute Comical Creatures? Cute Comical Monsters? Basically the sequel, which adds even more monsters for even more whimsical noise-making fun. So I can't wait to get that to the table. In fact, last year, my team at my day job had a virtual Christmas do, rather than an in-person one. And I managed to find from the Kickstarter there were the digital files of all of the different Wee Whimsical Creatures. So I had a virtual game with my team who not all of them play board games, a couple of them do. And there's one who's a little shy, a little averse, and everyone got in the spirit, everyone got making the noises, which was really good fun. As far as the RPG side of things, there were a few new releases. There was the horror game Shiver, which, to be honest, feels a little big and unnecessary. I remember it on Kickstarter, and it felt like it was trying to serve a few too many masters in what it was doing. And in fact, phrase I heard for a few different RPGs was you can basically play anything with it. And as I get older, I find myself growing a little more uncertain of that as a concept. And I like a lot of RPGs that do a kind of genre emulation. You know, a lot of the PBTA, Fortune of the Dark type games, and a game selling itself on its genericness and on its proprietary dice is instantly going to make me a little bit wary. At the same time, it might be good. It's only recently released, so I'll be keeping an eye out for any reviews, but just at first blush, I wasn't entirely convinced by it. But, you know, good luck to them for more non-5th edition type RPGs for better, just to vary it up. There was the Soul Muppet display as well. Soul Muppet produce a number of different games. There are a load of different ones, printed, distributed, held under their umbrella. Specifically, the book Orbital Blues, which is a sad space western RPG. It sounds like there are elements of Cowboy Bebop, but also if you want to play a kind of, I guess, less Whedon-y Firefly, which is probably the best kind of Firefly at the moment. Also, you know, without as much for weird Confederate kind of tones. So there was that. It sold out pretty damn quickly, it felt like. And they had a beautiful display, which hopefully I'll have sent to Mike and be able to display here. If not, I've just gestured at a shelf. In which case, you know, have a look. It's a nice shelf. Anyway, myself and Arthur, W.H. Arthur, author of several superhero cinematic universe indie RPGs and games about thieving noir seagulls, had a bit of a look around and a chat with different folks, and the Soul Muppet people were lovely. The motocross stand, I didn't see the designer actually there, but I spoke to the people who were working at the stand, and they were very nice. They chatted away with me about lazy GMing, which I do like, being lazy as a GM and kind of loading up all of the prep instead, well, the prep brain space into the game itself. While I didn't pick anything up specifically from there, they were showing off Hypertellurians, which is a good fun-looking kind of fancy sci-fi kind of weird gonzo RPG. A Bride for Dracula, which I have actually read out of their stuff. Hypertellurians I've owned but not actually got around to reading yet. But Bride for Dracula it's a kind of system agnostic dating show type contest where you are all different brides who are wanting to kind of win the prize of going out with Dracula. It's kind of like blind date, except some of you are secretly an evil brain in a jar. Some of you are secretly a vampire hunter looking to win the contest to kill Dracula. So a lot of shenanigans unfold. And a lot of the work from them is that sort of fun, odd, slightly wacky, slightly not quite OSR or old school kind of things, but they've got those vibes and let you be a bit creative and a bit daft with it. In fact, just to show off a little bit of swag, they were giving away this lovely little dungeon. The Bewilderment and Panic in the Land of Faulty Tours, and a bookmark for Motocross Machinations, which has D30 random finds. Now, I don't own a D30, but they include things like the Rimmed Orb of Too Many Legs. It's a leg explosion on impact, and they're not easily tamed. What a good table, just from that one entry alone. Love that kind of thing. So there was them. There was, of course, Rowan, Rook and Deckard, who have been enjoying the recent incredible Kickstarter for Die. Kieran Gillen and Stephanie Hans's RPG based on the comic from Image Comics, which is almost like a weird, dark take on either Jumanji or the Dungeons & Dragons cartoon, with the idea that as kids you were sucked away into a fantasy world that was basically your RPG campaign as kids. Something horrific happens. Who knows what happens, but what happened, but you survived. And now as adults, you reunite and end up going back into that world, but as, sad, old, tired, broken by life kind of people. So you almost live through your grief, your horror, your midlife crises in this fantastical world as designed by you as a teenager. Now, I have, in a cupboard just off screen here, a filing cabinet with way too many RPG notes, including some that I did use as a teenager. And it's extremely tempting when Die comes out to drag some of them out, some of the badly drawn maps, some of the badly written ideas, and use those as part of the world to run Die in and basically troll my teenage self. Anyway, Die wasn't there, but Heart and Sin were, and sold out. It was constantly hectic at their stall. So well done, Rowan and Deckard, for that. I got to chat with Sean Smith, who was also there, and discussed a little bit about Spire, a little bit about Rhapsody of Blood, actually, which I picked up a physical version of, as that's one of the next campaigns I'm going to run. It's only not on my shelf because it's downstairs to be read and reread in preparation for that campaign. Rhapsody of Blood's basically Castlevania, but as a kind of legacy game as an RPG. So you create a bloodline and they go into a castle, they fight a big bad, and they win or lose. And the world gets slightly better or slightly worse, and then time turns. And then you play the next generation of hunters going into the castle. And it might be that the big bad is your previous character. And again, time turns and your bloodline changes and evolves as it goes on, but it might be that you're the bloodline of heroes. You started off with a great paladin, a great noble warrior, and then your grandchild was a scavenger and their child is a magician, and so on and so on. It's fascinating seeing the way that game reads, and I can't wait to get it to the table. So getting a physical edition was a nice thing to do. I always like being able to have a physical copy of whatever book I'm running around with me. So it was them. Got a nice tote bag as well. That's become my RPG bag for whatever books and dice I'm lugging to the Dice Saloon. So that's quite nice. I have an illegible note. Cubicle 7 were there, as ever. And I don't really do much with the Warhammer Fantasy RPG stuff, or their Age of Sigmar RPG stuff, but they did have a single copy of the deluxe edition of the new version of the Doctor Who role-playing game. Cubicle 7 seemed cursed. Every time they're putting out a new edition featuring a specific Doctor, that Doctor's on the way out. And so it is here with the Jodie Whittaker edition. But the special edition is actually in the shape of a TARDIS. You open it up with its nice little doors, and that's a case for the book. Which is pretty neat looking. I love the Doctor Who RPG. I had really good fun running it. I don't know if I'm going to bother with the second edition. Not at this point, as it's been years since I last ran it. Of course, Cubicle 7, if you're there, if you're listening, I will gladly accept a review copy to check out and run for my group. Maybe sort out some kind of summer special or anything like that, as I think the last time I ran the Doctor Who RPG, it was a Christmas special that we did as well. And there were also there was the designer of Salvage Union there, and Salvage Union is a mech RPG powered by the quest system by the Adventure Guild, and it's a really interesting system. It's super light. It's literally just a D20 and a ladder of success, and that D20 is unmodified. It's a real basic kind of system, and something I could see being amazing for one, brand new role players, and two, actual play people, because the system gets out of the way until you need it to actually do things if anything is uncertain. And this game, Salvage Union, adds a little more meat to those bones. Quest itself has a selection of class abilities based on what kind of character you are. But Salvage Union, because you're piloting a mech, the mechs are constructed out of parts. And I had the delight of being in a demo game of it as well. I signed up for the Games on Demand, which, if you're a role player, if you want to find new and interesting things at Expo, at Dragon Meet, any of these kind of conventions, sign up for Games on Demand. It is amazing every single time. Lloyd, who runs it, is a ball of wonderful manic energy and a gracious host, even when he is utterly shattered and exhausted as he was when I went in for a game on the Sunday afternoon. It's always great to see him and see how he's pitching the different games and managing to organise all of the different tables. So on the Saturday evening, I think it was, I played my first convention game since March 2020, and this was Salvage Union. I was a character class which was a hauler. Arthur was along as well as a scavenger, and actually from the internet there was Simat, the notorious Twitter question asker / train guy, who I definitely recommend following if you're on Twitter at all. He helps make the Hell site slightly more bearable with his persistent and regular questions and his fairly regular posts about trains as well. So it was a fascinating game for that. We had, I want to say, a full or almost entirely full group, and it had a feeling a bit like a Borderlands or a Fallout in the world itself. It was very deserty, wastelandy kind of place, and our mechs were very plug and play with all of the parts. So I like the idea of a mech game. I hate the idea of BattleTech, of going, any of the micromanaging of the parts, but simply going, I have a big blue laser, because my hauler, the big carrier, has a mining laser, has carrying rigs, emergency pod, and a set of speakers, because the hauler character class is quite community-based. So my character was able to play some music. She had a harmonica, and it was a case of, okay, I can inspire emotions in NPCs by spending some action points. I could open up a deal by spending some action points where there might not normally have been that kind of availability. At the same time, the combat was nice and simple, worked really well. The modular nature of the mechs meant that when you had a bit blown off, you could replace it. You could go, okay, there's a bit of an inventory scrapping kind of system, but it's nice and simple. So you can go, okay, right, I'm going to have a green laser on here as well now. Now I've got a couple of lasers. I've got a nice little one, and then the big sexy cannon for when it gets serious. Or let's remove this flamethrower and add a sensor unit. And it immediately made me think, what's it going to be like running a campaign of this? Are the mechs you start the game with going to be entirely different to ones you end the game with? And I love that kind of ship of Theseus idea. The GM was really good there were a couple of moments of slight uncertainty of what we were doing and where we were going, mainly because we split the party, but it was wonderfully dealt with, wonderfully GM'd. There were some really good moments, and it felt like everyone got a bit of time to shine, which for a game that only lasts 2 hours and is new to everyone but the GM is a real credit to the GM and to the game itself. So that was a real joy, and immediately I felt bit by the bug and had to sign up for another game. And the second one was right at the end of all of it. It was a kind of a moment of the GM not quite realizing that they were there for another slot, and to their credit, they did really well with it. It was Black Code, and I'm just finding the name of the designer, who is also the GM. Black Code's a cyberpunk transhuman game by Mark Whittington, and is generally distributed by the All Rolled Up company, who also handle distribution of Cthulhu Hack. Black Code's, I think it's the first transhuman RPG that I've played, and I was a doctor, kind of. I had weird scorpion tails that came out of my shoulders, and a way more punkier than thou aesthetic. And it was all right. The system felt initially a little odd. You roll 4d6, and depending on how many skill dots you keep highest or lowest of them. So if you've got 1 dot, you roll 4d6 and you keep the highest and the 2 lowest. 2 dots, you keep the 2 highest, 2 lowest, and so on as... What is it? No, 2 highest, 1 lowest, 3 dots, the 3 highest, and 4 dots, you get a 6 added to it. It took a little bit of getting used to, and the setting was one which was a little busy for a 2-hour slot, but having the designer actually run it really helped. He had laminates going through it all while he was going off to quickly grab a drink and such before the game started. We were able to read through some of that. We got the basic pitch of it all, and the big thing is it felt characteristic. It felt characterful. It felt unique. And I like the idea of cyberpunk games, but a lot do end up just being wow, cool lasers. And this felt a bit different from that. I was a mutated human with designer genes, making me a weird kind of scorpion thing. We had an aspirant celebrity type guy who was trying to look, famous and suave and debonair with a giant gun, and all kind of showing off all the time, which was the character Arthur played, because he does like a good kind of comedy type character, but still was good and competent where he came down to it. And then we had someone who was a retired tank who was put into a slightly more portable body, but only slightly more. And yeah, we had a heist. Always love a heist. And it was a really fun time. Mark had run, I think, Dusk City Outlaws for me back in 2018, I think, in Expo. And that was a real fun time as well. So it was great fun getting to actually play some games on demand games, and the kind of thing where I do feel like at some point I probably ought to throw my hat in the ring and try and run some. The only problem is, much like my videos, I am prone to overrunning a tad. So yeah, that's most of my experiences in Expo. I admit a lot of it was still wandering around in a daze at the idea of a convention after all this time. And I didn't quite get to play as many demos as I'd like. I didn't chat to as many designers as I probably should have. And hopefully the next convention I go to, I'll get to put on my serious games journalist hat a bit more. I did manage to pick up some fun things. So as well as Rhapsody of Blood, picked up First Ride, Last Ride, a kind of solo early series Fast and Furious-ish game. You've got to pick between family and racing as your big things. I printed out a copy myself years ago and lost half of the cards. So actually having big, nice versions should get me actually playing it all the way through to the finish. I picked up Nisei because my partner saw the Shut Up and Sit Down review of it, and it reminded me I like Netrunner. I was not good at it, and it feels entirely her jam as far as card games go. So hopefully my ego can take the battering that's going to happen when we finally get to play that. Aside from that, I picked up some dice, because it's always nice to pick up some dice. And yeah, I think that's about it. Couple of Bez games, as I said. And yeah, it was a fairly light year for me. We'll see what the next con brings. I think for me, that's going to be probably probably Dragon Meat at the end of the year. And yeah, we'll see what happens and whether I can put out a video sooner than the delay between this and my last one. So that's it from me. You can follow me on @Charlie_EN on Twitter, where I will be talking about my upcoming comic Kickstarter at some point in the near future, and do talk about X-Men literally every day. Also, keep an eye out for Casual Trek. We have, I think it's Casual Trek Pod on Twitter. Give that a follow, because soon I'm going to be re-entering the podcastiverse. So yeah, that's it from me. Like, subscribe, comment, but only if you're complimenting me and insulting Mike. Bye.